Hello friends, welcome back again. In the last program, you remember we discussed about the general parameters of an economic behavior or the macroeconomics. Today we will like to understand how these behaviors, how these parameters actually can be able to help us to understand the country's strength, the country's economy. Someone says it's a good economy, it's a bad economy, it's a developing economy, or this economy is doing very good for last 2 decades. What actually it means? How can we explain using these parameters with these kind of symptoms within the economy? To begin with, let us understand there are a number of countries in the world, more than 160, 165 countries are there in the world. But if we look at the top 6-7 countries in the world in terms of its economic activity, we will take the parameter called GDP, gross domestic production. Now, what are the countries and what are their GDPs? The largest to give you GDP is America. American GDP roughly are around $20 trillion. So we say America is the largest economic activity generating country. After America, then you have China, roughly around $12 trillion. And look at the number. GDP gives you the kind of standardization that you can do on these numbers. America, then China, then Japan, then Germany, then Britain, then India, then France. No, India, somewhere roughly around $2.59 trillion. Just few months back, or say few quarter back, we were ahead of France. We went ahead of France because France economy are around $2.5 trillion in terms of GDP absolute, and ours are now approaching 2.59. So we are ahead of France and we are now occupying 6th position. You must have heard in the newspaper, very soon India can outbeat the Britain in terms of GDP. What it means? Present GDP of India is around 2.59 trillion, which roughly is very close to British GDP of $2.60 trillion. So maybe 1 quarter or 2 quarter, we may go ahead of Britain also, and we can come in the top 5 economy in the world. Now, when we say we can move ahead or we have outwit the France, what actually it means? It means the other parameter, GDP, and the second parameter was the growth rate of that GDP. What growth rate actually means to us? The escalation in the absolute value of goods and services that economy produced in a financial year. Let us take for example of India. It's the fastest growing economy in the world. Among the largest economy I'm talking about, among the larger economy I'm talking about, Indian GDP growth rate is roughly around 7.5%, which is a very, very high compared to British economy of 2%, French economy of 1.5%, or could be American economy of 3% growth rate. We could be called very close or little ahead of China, which also is maintaining around 6.5% to 7% of growth rate. So now you can actually, you can make it that good GDP and good GDP growth rate, these together can actually explain you the potential of an economy of its growth and how fast it is able to generate its economic behavior, its economic activity. But these two alone will not suffice the entire activity of a nation in terms of its economic activity. There are some other parameters. Let us, for example, take 2 more parameters. One is the fiscal, we'll say here balance. It may be fiscal surplus, it may be fiscal deficit. And we'll also take a current account, which can also have a current account surplus, can have a current account deficit. Now, what is fiscal account and what is a current account? Fiscal account is basically a domestic criteria of accounting of a nation, its revenue and its expenditure. Every country in the world gives its budget every financial year. And in the budget, it tells about the quantum of revenue, taxes that it can collect from the entire nation, and the quantum of expenditure, both revenue expenditure and the capital expenditure that it commits for the growth of the nation. There has to be some mismatch. If there is a mismatch, this can result into a surplus and can also result into deficit. In the world, almost all the economics or the economies are basically into fiscal deficit mode. It means we commit more expenditure with a lesser revenue. And how do we do this? That we go for borrowing every year. We will not go into borrowing in this class today, but you understand this, that we commit more expenditure with a lesser revenue. That means we are all having fiscal deficit. In the larger economy, if you say in the top 10 economy, there is only one nation that can claim to have a fiscal surplus status. Example is Germany. Germany, among all this, which is also the fourth largest economy ahead of Britain and after Japan, is having fiscal surplus. They do not have fiscal deficit, unlike any other economy. Say America, say China, say Japan, say India, say Britain, say France. All of us have got fiscal deficit, but Germany has got fiscal surplus. But what's about the current account? Yes, current account wise also Germany has surplus position, but there are other nations also who has got a current account surplus. Like Japan has got current account surplus. Like China has got current account surplus. Means they are having more export and less import. They have more receivables and less payable. But let us take the example of India and America. These two countries, or let us say adding Britain and France also, these four countries neither have a current account surplus position nor have a current fiscal surplus position. Means they are running deficit in both the accounts. India, on account of a very high GDP, considerably very high GDP and astronomically high growth rate, are able to project a very good fortune hereafter. So if you add these four parameters, we can very well explain the strength of an economy of a nation. These are the variables that will help us. Thank you.